Hi, everybody. How is everyone doing today? I am joined by some fantastic people. As you can see, we've got Elly Wade there. You're on my top
Hey.
left. I don't know if everyone else sees you on the top left as well. We've got Chad Perkins
Hey.
and also Julia Siemón. And we're here to talk to you about titles today. So we've got quite a lot of information to cover. This is one of 5 webinars that we're doing this month in August, every day on Monday. And I think one of the greatest parts about this is that we're going to have different people throughout the series. So welcome. And I'm curious, if you don't mind, in the question area, feel free to introduce yourself. And I'm curious where you guys are from.
We got Jay signing in as usual from Newcastle and calling this Motion Monday or Max on Mondays. So we agree with that.
Max on Mondays, indeed. And I just want to check, can everyone see my screen okay? And can you guys hear me okay?
Wow, we got people from all over, from Kansas,
Yes,
Chicago, Montreal, St. Petersburg, Suffolk, Salton, Washington, Berlin, Miami. Wow. New York as well, Arizona, Amsterdam. This is just an international list. This is amazing.
And Simon, I didn't introduce you, but I didn't know that you were going to be here. So thank you for being here, man.
I'm just accidentally here, Nick.
I pressed the start button too soon. Can you guys see my screen okay?
I can.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. So first of all, I just want to let everyone know about all of the fantastic events going at Maxon, and you can check it out at the maxon.net /events page. A few things that are going on this month in particular that I wanted to draw your attention to is, of course, this series. So you should come back every Monday at 12 Eastern, 9 Pacific. But there's also a hands-on series happening starting August 5th that's going for 6 weeks, 6 sessions in particular, all about introduction to color grading. And it's hands-on, so you get to get exercise files as well as have an interactive workflow with some really great experts here at Maxon and beyond. So that's pretty exciting. There's also the recurring VFX and Chill series that you can check out on YouTube here. Next one on August 6th. And a few other things you should check out too, like the 3D Motion and Design show happening on August 18th again. Simon, do we have free teas to give out potentially to the people who are here?
We do indeed. And those regular viewers will know the routine by now. You'll see inside the handout section in the GoToWebinar interface a handy little PDF which has the links for download files that we'll be sharing and the link to this merch location with the password for that. And the password is 08 titles this month. Much creativity went into naming that password.
That's a good, I like that though. That title totally makes sense with the theme. My screen just went away there for a second, so let me hop back up here into my Safari. And I just wanted to let you know that we're recording this session today as well. And we'll have the recording placed up tomorrow at some point. If you wanted to watch this again, simply head to the Maxon Training YouTube page. And there you'll be able to see not only this demystifying post-production session, but a ton of other content, not to mention some 20-second tips, as well as some snippets from various webinars of some hands-on training that went or took place last month and the month before. Elly, you actually did some intro to Cinema 4D, a hands-on series that I think there's some snippets available there. And then there's one on some intro to particles where we covered various topics in both After Effects as well as Cinema 4D.
Yeah, there are a whole bunch on there now, I think. Yeah, all like the basics of Cinema 4D, which is all been broken down and all time-stamped as well, so you can fly through those quicker.
Awesome. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a second, and I'm going to hop in to actually share some resources. But before we kick it off inside of the Cinema 4D application, I thought it would be just great with this series of roundtable of experts that I have here in front of me, that we just had a general conversation about title design, as well as what we find inspirational when it comes to titles, whether that be working inside of Cinema 4D or combining that workflow with After Effects. So my first question, and I'm going to just throw Chad on the spot here. Chad has, if you don't know Chad, he's done a lot of work inside of After Effects, and he combines those workflows with 3D. And I was curious, when it comes on a title design perspective, what do you find inspiring? Like, what sites do you go to when you go about title design creation, or just graphic creation in general?
So I think like that site, Art of the Title or something like that, the Art of the Title or Art of the Title, whatever that like site is. I feel like that's kind of like the generic like go-to place for title design. But I feel like my tastes in titles are kind of like, I don't know. I was really heavily influenced by Saul Bass. I think a lot of people are Saul Bass. I feel like the most like pedestrian answer in the whole world to be like, oh, Saul Bass, it's great. But like I really actually like all those old movies. Like 40s, 50s, 60s movies are like my favorite. And so those titles that he designed at the birth of titles for movies are so impactful for me. And they really make a difference in the experience of watching the movie. And, you know, a lot of movies from that era didn't have titles because it was like a new thing. And so then, you know, watching these movies and feeling like, you know, you're watching Psycho and you're having this like really odd sequence where there's just a bunch of, you know, crazy things happening in the beginning with the graphics. It just kind of really sets the tone for that whole experience. Man with the Golden Arm right there on the screen. It's a really interesting movie about heroin addiction from the 50s, which you wouldn't think, but that was kind of like one of the earliest title designs. It's like right there at the top of your screen a little bit, but
Gotcha.
yeah, Bunny Lake is Missing, another one of my all-time favorite movies that's on your screen right there too. And so oftentimes like I will come to a place like Art of the Title, but also I have like my own favorites of, you know, movies that I love and the titles from those movies. And I will go back to those movies and just kind of like rewatch and pause and whatever and kind of take it apart. And also too, it helps because I think for me, I'm going on too long here. I'm going to cut off. Never mind. Sorry. Go. Somebody else can go.
No, I think your information is fantastic. And I just wanted to add to that, Chad, the Art of the Title I've been going to for the last 10 years, if you haven't heard of it. And one great thing on top of, you know, Saul Bass, which you've mentioned, one of like the greatest designers when it comes to title design and sequences within films. On top of that, you can see other modern day title sequence designers like Kyle Cooper. And on top of that, like do a search by the various design studios here and see some of the work that they have created. So just a great all-around resource when it comes to titles and being able to see titles, as well as title designs that are currently up for nomination at various shows like the Emmys that you can see here. So I think it's a fantastic resource. And to add to that, I was doing some searching online. I'll have to bring this back up again, but I have another title resource. This is Imaginary Forces, a company that does a lot of work when it comes to design, not only with titles, but other designs as well that you could check out. I'm trying to see if I have the title design project is a newer resource that I just or that you can look at and see main title design, as well as just design in general, and has it's not an opening title sequence, but Stranger Than Fiction. I love this movie. They have a section at the very beginning of the film that was designed by MK12. I just love the use of how they integrated titles in the story of the voiceover with Will Ferrell here. You can check it out there, and it's also available on the Art of the Title. Now, I'm taking up too much time, just like Chad, so I have to bring this question now over to Julia And Elly, in terms of what do you guys have in terms of title design in general, which you find inspirational, or even the theoretical aspect of title design, where do you guys go?
I'll let Julia go first, then I'll go.
Well, I think all the sites that you've mentioned, of course, it obviously started with title and the design title, design project. I think those are the big ones. But I also think that just something that I was taught like way back in the day for just thinking about titles in general, just every day, just going outside and looking at, titles that are created in real life, like on the store windows. Storefronts do these amazing real life sculptures and settings, like their set designs amazing. And I think just looking at those is also very inspirational for when you're considering how type can function in 3D world, because obviously the 3D that we do kind of tries to mimic or has inspiration from the real world, and finding that in real world is very applicable. Yeah, I would say that's the biggest takeaway for me usually.
Julia, when you mentioned that, have you guys seen this show on Netflix? It's I forget, I cannot believe I'm drawing a blank on the name, but it focuses on creativity in general and a number of different art disciplines. And there was one designer that they focused on who was primarily involved with typography, but specifically designing it towards storefronts. And when I'm in the background later, when Elly and Julia are going to be sharing some great things about type, I will share the name of the show, but
It's
hopefully it will just
Abstract: The Art of Design. Sean
there
was
we go.
saying that's the one, I think.
That's the one. Yeah, Sean
Yes.
was Sean beat me to the punch. Yeah, I love that show, and I have to find the name of now the artist who was featured during that. But that's what it reminds me of when you're talking about storefronts and that type of typography design. And I'm right now here on your website, Julia, and even looking at the thumbnails, you've had quite a lot of work when it comes to placing titles in design in both 2D and 3D work. So I'm so excited to see what you're going to be showing today.
Yeah, so it's just a disclaimer, it's an old site. I haven't updated it with my latest and greatest, but I will. I don't know. So, throwing it out
Awesome.
there.
David was just actually mentioning the name of the artist, Paula Shear. So great. I don't have to type that in anymore. Everyone beat me to the punch. And Elly, we were just talking a little bit earlier, and you were sharing some of your resources as well when it comes to title design and where you go to find inspiration.
Yeah, so I'm keen on Behance, whether it's for like title design or anything, any kind of like design inspo. I think Behance is just a really great like site. And like sort of like Chad said, just watching movies and just watching things on like Netflix or on like TV, you just kind of, I don't know whether it's because we're in the industry, but I find myself being like, oh, hey, that's a really cool design. And so I don't think my friends watch anything with me anymore. But I mean, that's another way I get inspiration. So there's a show on BBC that was called His Dark Materials, and they do this really like amazing like title design that has like all particles coming down, and it was just like really, really cool. And so yeah, I'd go on YouTube and I'd like try and see how it was done, as well as like Perception and Black Panther.
Mm-hmm.
That can be found, just that kind of title sequence can be found on their YouTube, and it is like I found myself watching it a few times before getting ready for these webinars for this month.
We were actually spoiled a chat a few months ago where we took part in a Demystifying series on FUI, and Perception was a guest in the first episode. So you guys should totally check that out on the YouTube page. You're just mentioning them, Elly, so I wanted to make reference that
cool.
there's a ton of stuff available on the like main Maxon YouTube site that you can check out, because they were involved with a few of the 3D motion show. But we also have an interview with the CEO of Perception, so you should totally check that out as well, because I find that the concepts here are very relevant. And now that we've kind of talked about inspiration, I wanted to just throw out a few resources in general, and then we can start showing some great, incredible stuff inside of Cinema 4D. I don't know if you guys have heard of this site. It's called Typewolf, but this is this guy just loves type in general, and he talks about different ways to pair type, like anything from alternatives of Helvetica, where you have like 10 alternatives that you can use that look like Helvetica but aren't in terms of spicing up your work. And even better, if you use Adobe fonts or in the Adobe spree of applications, he then has his favorite like list of 100 favorite font pairs as it comes to Adobe fonts, right, which you can transfer from system to system. So just a great resource overall. I mean, it's meant for still-based design, but a lot of this stuff can be brought into MoGraph as well. So I absolutely love this site in terms of finding out different ways of pairing fonts or using different fonts outside of the box of, let's say, your usual font pairings. Another things, and we're just talking about title design and animation in general. Here's my favorite book. Have you guys heard of this? Design for Motion?
I don't see where the, oh, no.
It's so this is Austin Shaw. He's the writer, and I believe he is a professor at just an incredible book overall in terms of MoGraph design or motion. And he also does a bunch of stuff with Motionographer, but you should totally check out this book. He even breaks down different ways of how you can conceptualize titles when you're first given a brief. So that's what I absolutely love about this book. You could totally check it out, Design for Motion. And in fact, you probably can't see it that well with my camera, but I have it here on my desk, and it's just really pretty inside. You have all of these people's like storyboards or breakdowns of various film title concepts that you can check out if you're looking to be inspired with a book on your desk.
It's a great resource.
Oh, thanks, Chad. And here's another one. This is just about type, and I love it for the fact that it kind of looks like a diary, but a lot of time was spent in terms of the spacing, the leading, as well as the color design of this book, and then just basic title theory design meant for titles stagnant on a page, but a lot of this stuff you can bring into MoGraph design. Cool. So that was the two kind of this just some of those theory resources that I wanted to bring out. I also have a keynote that I'll share through a link where you can download some of the project files that we'll have throughout these 5 different demystifying sessions. But now that we've covered a little bit of what inspires us and some links in terms of theory, Elly, you have some stuff to show us inside of Cinema, and then like how we can use Cinema as that engine for title design and creation. Am I correct?
Yes. So I thought a nice kind of like starting off point would be, I know we're going to look at kind of redshift textures and making some really cool stuff and then comping it in After Effects, but the first step is actually just creating text inside of Cinema 4D. And so I thought I'd go from like absolute zero and just show how are the different ways we can create some 3D text straight away in Cinema 4D. So
cool. I actually just sent over to you the reins of showing your screen. I don't know if you can see it popping up there. Oh, there we go. So that's a yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So can everyone see my screen? So I've enlarged my display as well, and I've got this little like ring around my cursor. Just hopefully it makes it a little bit easier for people to kind of look at. Cool. Right. So let me just get into it. I'm going to try not take up like too much time because I know Julia's got some really cool like stuff to show that she works on. But yeah, as I said, I thought, especially for like week 1 of this, like all about title design and title creation, just getting into learning how to create 3D text inside of Cinema 4D would be a really nice like jumping off point. There's a couple of different ways you can do it, and there's a whole bunch of tools inside of kind of just even like the text object in Cinema 4D that can start to make some cool looking text. So I'll just get started. So inside of Cinema 4D, so just to start with, I'm using version 24. And so if you're using a previous version, I'm just going to sort of explain some slight differences that we might come across. So inside of Cinema 4D, we have a whole bunch of preset primitives, and one of those is actually a text object. So this is where some of the slight differences might happen. So before version 24, we used to have something called MoText. So inside of our MoGraph menu, we used to have a MoText object. And what this was like a normal text object, so which you could change your text of, but you could also use the MoGraph tools with it. As of version 24, that was actually removed. However, this text object, you can use the MoGraph tools with. So we haven't kind of just removed it completely. We've just kind of like merged the two together. So if you find that you've kind of installed 24 and you wonder where MoText is, don't worry, it's still here. So we can still, you know, we can still come and grab like a effector and then drop like a linear field in, and we can still do that. Cool. So as soon as we've like created our text, let's have a look at a couple of like tabs inside of here. So the main tabs we want to look at are our object tab and our caps tab. So in our object tab, we have a few
Elly,
different settings.
Elly, can I ask you a quick question? Sorry.
You can.
I don't mean to interrupt, but so I noticed that you just created text and then it's a generator thing. Like you don't have to add an extrude. It just kind of like, it just is 3D now.
Yes, that's right. Yes, there are a couple of different ways. So I'm going to show you the way as well how you can use like a text spline and an extrude. But this now, it is just a like sort of like a generated primitive on its own. So you don't have to worry about doing the extrude. All of the settings are now found within these tabs here.
Oh, I love that. I didn't know that. Sorry, as you were, I appreciate that. I didn't know.
No, it's cool. I'll show you the other way as well, because that's also a handy way, especially if you're bringing like, if you've created your own kind of text like path inside of Illustrator, you can bring that in. So we'll look at both ways because they are both useful to know. So let's have a quick look. So we have our depth, which is the depth of our text. If I come a little bit closer in here, we can sort of, you know, increase this or decrease this dependent on the size that we're after. Our subdivisions, if I start to increase this, we can't see anything, and that's because of our display mode. So let's go up to our display mode. So at the moment we have our kind of ground shading on, but if we select our lines, and if I kind of decrease this now to 1, we can see that we're increasing the subdivisions on the depth of our text. And this is really handy for when we are doing things like adding like displacement or adding subdivisions, or I don't know, using like vertex maps. You may want a kind of a more denser sort of mesh for your text. And especially if you're looking to eventually make this editable, this is where you would increase the subdivisions on here. And then we can also increase the subdivisions on the front as well, but we'll look at that in a little bit. So for now, I'm just going to kind of put that down to 1. Cool, so our text spline, so as Chad was just saying about the text spline and the extrude, inside of this kind of text object is actually kind of the text spline itself. And so here is where we can choose what we want our text to say. So let me just write the word like titles in here, and it's going to update in real time. And then we have our 3D text saying titles. We also have access to a whole bunch of fonts inside of here. And these are the fonts that are on your machine. So, you know, we can come through here and we can, let's just choose a random font. Let's choose this one here, nice and blocky. And then our alignment. So our alignment's quite an important feature here. So at the moment, our alignment is set to left, and we can see that we have our sort of like axis on the left-hand side of our text. And so our axis is at 0.0. And so what this means when it comes to, let's say, rotating, for example, if I hit my R key, my rotation is going to happen around this axis, which is on the left-hand side of my text. So if I sort of start to rotate it, we can see that that rotation happens that way. But if we set our alignment to the middle, our axis is now in the middle of our text, and we can see it's kind of all shifted over. So it's all now like centered based on our middle alignment. And now if I use my rotate, we're now rotating around the center of our text. So it seems quite like a small thing, but if we're animating it, particularly in this sense, it does make a big difference. I'm going to leave
Elly?
it on middle for now.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, I had a question just in terms of your workflow in general. I was
Yeah.
curious, do you use any of the preferences for titles like kind of built in on like the golden ratio, rule of thirds, like the grids that you can put up? Do you use that in your workflow
I
at all?
don't know.
Okay.
No.
I was curious. Julia, it's the same. Do you use some of those built-in tools at all from Cinema 4D?
No,
Okay.
I use like title safe, but not a grid or something like that.
Gotcha. And there was just a follow-up question I had for you, Elly, based on a question that was here. I don't know if we're covering this in the weekly series, but someone was just wondering, like, how can you take this title and bend it on the z-axis? So I just wanted to throw that out there, depending on where you're going and stuff for.
Yeah. Yeah. So we could do that with our deformers. So we could grab, so when we say bend on the z-axis, and what sort of bending it like out like this, perhaps?
I'm assuming, I'm just reading a question from the chat. That's so yeah.
Well, let me just show how we could kind of use a deformer. So we can grab our bend deformer and we can just make it a child of our text. And then let's sort of do like a fit to parent. And then, so we could create a bend literally just by using deformers. Let's see how this can look. Oh, it's not going to do that, is it? So yeah, this is how we could create a bend. You'd just have to find the right kind of alignment for it and then adjust our strength, and then we could create a bend that way. Let's try the z-axis fit to parent. Okay, so it doesn't like it that way too well. Yes, but that's how you would
Go about it. Yeah.
Go about it, sort of like, oh, there we go, that might work a little better. Sort of like that. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Sort of like that, perhaps. So yeah, literally using, and you can use any of the deformers, you know, you can use like a bulge or like a taper to create sort of like an effect like that.
And this is very much like based on the amount of like geometry that's in the text as well that you were showing, like how many segments there are.
Yes, that would play a part as well. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so that answers the question. Jean was just saying, yes, thank you for the Z-space bend.
Oh, perfect. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Right, yeah, so let's take a little look at a few more of these settings, because they are, when we're talking about like the theory side of things, this is where you'd be able to make those adjustments to kind of really perfect how like your text or your typography is looking, before even getting into like, you know, like adding displacement or adding textures. So right, so we went through the alignment, and so our height, as we know, you know, is going to be the height of our text, so we can just kind of increase or decrease that as we want. Horizontal spacing, if we increase that, so let's say put it up to like 30 centimeters, it's going to kind of uniformly space these letters all together. So this isn't like kerning. This is just kind of 30 centimeters between each of our individual letters. And then we could, let's say, titles webinar, and then we can see that we also have access to like vertical spacing as well. So let's take that out, and then let's look at, let's go back to 0. So we have some default settings here. And now let's have a look at kerning. So if we switch kerning on, we have this like show 3D GUI. We have access to each of our individual letters, and the kerning is going to allow us to adjust the spacing between each individual letter. So whereas horizontal spacing was like kind of uniformly just adding spacing between our letters, which is also useful. But you might find, especially with some fonts, I find there could be overlapping of the geometry of like it maybe, let's say, I think I can even make it do it with the word Maxon. I think it does it. There we go, cool. So yeah, so we have our A and our X. Our geometry is intersecting, and that's not something that we'd want. So we can actually click on the X and pull it away. So we've now just created some space in between the A and the X. And if we have this little tiny arrow here, which I might not be too clear to see, but if we click that, we have a whole bunch of additional options relating to our individual lettering and how we can kind of adjust these individual letters. So this start and end, these numbers relate to an individual letter. So if I want just the M, so just this from M here, I can go 0 and I can go 1, and we can now see just the M is highlighted orange. And then we can adjust the kerning, tracking, scale, and baseline of just this letter. So let's say I wanted to have a slightly larger M. This scale here is my uniform scale. So I don't just want to do my horizontal or vertical. I want to do this, this kind of third scale option. And I can sort of just increase this. And now we have just the M that's been enlarged. And then a quick tip as well, instead of worrying about having to actually do a start and end, if you press Command and you click one of the letters, it's just going to highlight that one for you, so you have access to just that letter instead of like worrying about counting your letters if you've got like loads and loads of like text going on. And then we can also, let's kind of make this one smaller, just to mess with it. And then we can also do like a baseline shift, just to sort of mess with our titles here. So kerning is actually quite like a powerful thing, which I think could be ignored inside of Cinema 4D, but this saves you from having to create like multiple different text things. So like, for example, you could create another text and you could say, oh, I want this one to be the M and I want it to be larger, but then you're going to have to move it across. You can do it all in the same text just by adjusting your kerning. And then if you've done what I've done and totally messed with your text, you can actually just reset it to default. And you can switch it off, and then it takes away all that GUI. So yeah, kerning is definitely something that you might want to do. So let me write my titles back in here. And let's have a look at this next tab here, which is caps. And so caps is really great for adding some kind of beveling effect to our typography. So let me come right in here. So at the moment, we don't have kind of any beveling going on. So we just have this really kind of like sharp line here on our text. If we come down to this, we've got a whole bevel menu here, which was new-ish. So we used to have like fillet cap and fillet radius. And then in one of like the versions not too long ago, it was changed to bevel. So we have this bevel shape, we have 4 different options, and we'll have a quick look at them all. But the first one we have here is round. And so we're going to create a nice rounded bevel. And let's say we want the size to be 1 centimeter. We now have this kind of nice rounded edge on our title text. The number of subdivisions at the moment is 3, and this is our segments option. So if we have, let's say we have a slightly larger bevel, 3 segments isn't quite creating enough of a rounding. It's a little bit kind of rigid. So what we'd need to do is if we have a larger bevel, we'd want to make sure we increase our segments so we get that nice kind of smoother rounding happening. And then this shape depth. So 100% shape depth is what's creating this nice kind of like outward rounding. If I set it to 0%, we have this completely kind of like a straight sort of bevel going on. And then if we go kind of like the opposite way and we do -100, we have this sort of like inner bevel, sort of like inner rounding happening, which I think is quite a nice effect. Let me set this back to 100, and then let's have a quick look at a couple of other options. So another option is curve. And once we've selected curve, we then get this sort of F curve menu here with this spline. And we have our 2 sort of points. We have our start point, we have our end point. And if we keep an eye on this shape here, so at the moment it's this like perfectly sort of like straight line. And if I start to like mess with this curve a little bit, what's happening is it's taking the curve spline, and that is what is defining the shape of the bevel. So we can start to create some really kind of interesting looking designs here. And let's maybe make this a little bit smaller. So we're basically sort of like drawing our own bevel shape, and we could even do, you know, like a control click to create additional points to kind of adjust those as well if we want to. And then we still have access to, you know, the shape depth, the size, and the segments of this as well. Solid, the way that solid works is if we switch our lines off and we sort of increase this, you might think, oh, Elly, you're just sort of like extending the shape depth. But what's actually happening is, yes, it is doing that, but it's extending it and creating subdivisions. And so if you ended up kind of, you know, subdividing this using like a subdivision surface, this would create some nice rounding because we've added some additional segments onto it without having to worry about, you know, actually making it editable and using like the knife tool with a loop cut. So, you know, solid can come in handy. And the final one is step. And so the size, so if we set our size to 1 centimeter, the entire bevel is going to be a size of 1 centimeter. So we can have, you know, as few segments as we want, and it's still going to be 1 centimeter. Therefore, they're bigger segments or bigger steps. Or we can kind of, you know, have a whole bunch, but it's never going to go past that 1 centimeter. We also have some presets. So if I open up my load preset here, and hopefully these are clear enough to see, we have a whole bunch of different options in here. And I mean, they're great on their own, but they're also like a really great starting point. So if I go to like shifted bevel, we can see that this is based on the curve, and we have our size and we have our curve here, which is, you know, quite an interesting looking shape. And if we sort of come out of here, maybe go into shading, we can see that like the presets are quite nice on their own, but, you know, as I said, they're also quite a good a starting point. So, you know, we could start to adjust the size, and then we could even adjust some of these options in here to just to perfect them really. Okay, so I'm taking up a lot of time, so let me really quickly, before I get into anything else, let me show you the way that Chad was saying about how we can use a text spline and extruding it to create the similar kind of effect. So let me really quickly go to a new project. So inside our spline menu, we have some preset splines, and one of them is our text spline. And you'll recognize these are the exact same settings that we just had inside of our text primitive. So we can, you know, make these changes. We can type text spline, we can adjust our font. Let me just quickly grab this one here is quite cool. And then what we can do, we can actually use a generator to generate some geometry, because straight away, so splines can't be rendered inside of Cinema 4D. You have to turn them into geometry in order for us to be able to see them in a render. So what we can do, we can grab our text spline and we can grab an extrude. And all we have to do is make the text spline a child of our extrude. And then we have inside the extrude those similar settings that we just had a look at inside of our kind of original text object here. And this same setup can be used so in Illustrator, let's say you have your own font, and you've drawn your own paths of like your logo or title design. If you save this out as Illustrator 8, this can then be brought into Cinema 4D, and we can turn this into geometry using that same effect. So let's come back into Cinema 4D. Let me find this Maxon. I'm going to drag that in. And so all I've done is dragged in that Illustrator file, and we now have our individual splines here. Let me just center this out. So we can now turn this into geometry. So let me just pull these out. What I'm going to do, just for convenience, I'm going to select them all, I'm going to right click, I'm going to go to connect objects and delete, just so it creates one entire spline path. And then we can do that same thing, grab our extrude and drop that into there. And so this is coming quite small, so let me just turn that off. And sometimes what I like to do, I like to size things based on Cinema 4D's like default sizing. And so if you grab a cube, I'm going to grab my spline and I'm just going to scale this up just so it matches like Cinema 4D's like default-ish sizing. And so now that extrude looks a little bit better. And then again, we still have access to, you know, our cap, so we can add some rounding on there if we wanted to. And the coolest thing about this is we're still able to make changes to our spline. So if I come into my front view, we sort of come out of here, if I switch off my extrude and we go into my spline path, so let me just go Maxon. If we go into our points mode, which is just here on the left-hand side, we can actually still make changes. So let's say we wanted that to be just sort of like a solid O without like a hole in it. And we can come back into here, switch our extrude back on. And now we're making changes to the Illustrator kind of text that we've made. We turn it into geometry and then we're still able to kind of edit it if we wanted to. One final thing I wanted to show before I hand over, if I go back to here. So one other really great thing about this is when we talk about creating things in a non-destructive way and things being procedural, it means we're able to make changes even after we've done some kind of like things to it. So let's say let's just really quickly do that same MoGraph setup that I did. So let me grab a plane effector and let me grab a linear field. And so even after I've done this, even after I've added like textures and whatever to it, I can still come back into my text, make any changes I want to, and change what this says. And it's all going to update in real time. So it's all completely procedural.
This is like one of my favorite features of Cinema 4D, like that procedural nature, Elly. And just to add to the part of the bevels that we were showing too, you were showing like how it's such a great starting point to load a bevel preset, but that exact same menu also allows you to save bevel presets. So if you spent like your time, like, you know, creating a 20-point like curve, right, or step-by-step curve, you can save that out and then easily apply that to any other piece of text that you bring into, or basically, you start from in Cinema 4D, whether it be a spline-based workflow or the MoText that you were showing. And I wanted to, I was curious, Elly, in terms of the Illustrator 8 workflow, that's the file that you have to save for the spline-based workflow with Illustrator. However, on Cineversity, there is some CV tools which you can use that could really speed up like the Illustrator workflow and work with modern Illustrator files. However, I was curious, there was a question, do you know if the CV tools support the SVG format as well, or is it just modern Illustrator files?
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure. Sorry, I don't. I don't use it. Unfortunately, I'm still old school, and I save as Illustrator 8.
Got it. Okay.
But I'm sure we can find out.
And then I guess just before handing it over to Julia, this is a great question just for everyone here. It came up earlier in the chat, and that was, are there certain fonts or typefaces that lend themselves better to 3D than others?
I would say so. I'd say, you know, sort of like I don't know what it'd be called, but you know, like handwritten script fonts probably aren't. You can still use them, but I mean, I guess you'd probably find more of like the bold fonts tend to work better, at least in my experience. But I'd be interested to know what like the others think as well.
Cool. Awesome. And I think, Julia, you have some incredible stuff to show as well when it comes to some of the work that you've done within Cinema 4D and it comes to text animation and treatments.
Yes.
Cool. Shall I chuck the screen over? Let me.
I'm ready. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. There we go.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I
can
can
see
see your screen.
Okay, great. All right. Yeah, the bevel stuff was really cool. Like the presets, I didn't really know you could do the presets. Like I didn't know that was. Well, I guess yeah. I'm so used to like the old style where you had like the drop down menu and you just like click a few of them and see which ones work. But that's pretty awesome. I'm definitely gonna use that. So basically, I guess I would start more like when you get the brief from a company, if you're working on the show or any sort of commercial work, which is something that I do more of. I do a lot of show branding and commercial work. So a lot of the times a client will come in and they have a new show that they want to design a package for. And we work out the title. Obviously, that's the most important aspect of it because it kind of everything builds up from there. And how do we approach the initial design and then bring it into 3D? So the initial brief, you have it, you read it, and then you see what the client wants. Sometimes it might not be a lot of visuals, in which case pretty much the whole package will rely on your treatment of type. But sometimes you have footage. A lot of times, there'll just be an edit of the show clip, and then you just have the title at the end. And where I start kind of finding my inspiration or doing a pitch based on the brief is a lot of times I think this is important for all designers working in this field, is just to start creating a library of references. And not only from, obviously, title sequences are great, like movie film sequences are awesome, but I think from just anywhere, just start, one of the really great things is to walk around, if we all have a camera in our pocket, and if you see some sort of even neon signs, which are so popular to do in 3D, it's really great to just know how they're built. You notice the wires, notice the little knobs and the dirt on the cords or whatever it is. So just pay attention to these little minute details because you can see when a neon sign is really badly done in 3D because it's just like neon tubes and there's nothing connecting them and they're basically floating and you're like, why do you have floating? Like that doesn't exist really. So it's just those things, just to pay attention to the little details because that will make your work stand out so much more. But it's just, in graphic design, those elements here are really excellent. Just, different treatments. And having that library allows you to quickly go in, and a lot of times we're not given much time to create a pitch. Usually it's about 2 days. I mean, if we're lucky, then maybe it's a week, but at most it's a very quick turnaround. So you end up staying late, and if you're hunting for references for those 2 days, then you wasted all that time. Whereas if you have a whole library, you can fall back on and be like, oh, and just take a select few and you work from there. So I definitely recommend for anybody who's doing a design to establish that. So once we kind of figure out what we want to do, then we select a few images. In this case, I was there was a show. This is kind of just a quick PDF that I threw together of some things that I worked on, like the brain games, but I'm kind of getting off topic here. And so there was a show called Weeds, and I think it was in the 2010s, I think, and they're bringing it back. So this is the old logo. This is the old style of the logo. So how do we create a new typeface for this, or how do we create a new logo for this, or a new title, for this? Logos and titles to me is almost identical, just because a lot of logos have type. But anyways, I digress. So the way that I start working is I start black and white. So always start start in Illustrator, start laying out fonts, because, you know, it makes it easier to visualize, and a lot of times for print, because obviously this is eventually will be going to print, it's just good to have a black and white layout. It's clean, it's easy to see what works, what doesn't, and I just lay out a bunch of typefaces, which, you know, I like, and I want to see how it looks in 3D. And from there, I will take that into, so I will select a few of these. Possibly one of the key things is legibility. It's very important that it reads. So, and that goes for commercial work, that goes for, you know, any sort of titles for shows, because you want it to be, if it's on the bus and it goes by, you want to make sure that the person who's looking at the bus billboard can understand what, you know, can read the show, remember it in the brain, even, you know, just like in a passing. So you don't want to clutter it up. You want it to be very simple, yet interesting visually, but just don't clutter up the, you know, the background too much, because legibility is really, really important. And it's something that I mention a lot. Like, yes, you can be all just, you know, disjointed. It can be distorted within the promo or within the commercial, but at the end, when you land on the final end tag, it should be legible and clear, and nothing should be, you know, blocking it, or because that is your lasting impression. That's what you want the viewer to remember. So this was, I picked out two fonts. I picked out this one at the top here and this one over here, which I thought was the most legible, and I kind of wanted to see what they would look like in 3D. And then I brought them into 3D by, so the similar, let me see what Elly mentioned. It was a similar process of converting into splines in Illustrator, which I'll show you now, and just bringing it in 3D. And I applied hair to this, and all of it is lit in Redshift. This is not the final. I'm still working on adding a little bit more detail to the actual font itself. Oh yeah, working on Demystifying, and everything laid out here. Sorry, I'm gonna wait a little bit. Should really just, okay. So again, these are all the fonts that I used. This one was a little too, as somebody asked about, you know, what kind of fonts might not work well in 3D. Well, this is kind of like borderline might not work. 3D, you really would like, it's best and preferable if they are, again, legible and clear so you can read it. So that's why like the brush fonts really don't work as well. So just sans serif work really well, and even just a little bit of serif is okay too. Let's see. So I took one of them and I created, yes, I know, because I moved everything around, so everything is in different folders now. So let's do this. So again, export it as Illustrator 8. Also, you have to convert it into outlines. So when you have this, you can just right-click. For some reason it's not doing that. Oh, because it's already converted into Illustrator 8. But in general, you would go in, for instance, here, you right-click, you say create outlines. And once you create outlines, then you can save it as Illustrator 8. And then you bring it into C4D. Basically, this is how my setup looks. I usually like to turn on the lines so I can see how much information I have laid out. But let's just turn off everything. Let's turn this back on and turn off my hair setup. Let's just turn everything off here. Actually, I should have just deleted this out, but okay. So then I have my Illustrator outlines brought in. I do like to, one of the things I really do like to change in my spline, so once you bring that in, Let me just create actually a new one so it's not so cluttered. Otherwise, I feel like it's hard to follow. Merge project. Let's bring this one. That sounds good. Also, in the import, I find that it brings it too small of a scale, so I usually like to scale it up 10 centimeters. Yeah, I think I group splines is okay. And then I haven't really figured out if there's a best way to like bring them in the center, so I usually go into the null unless somebody has an idea of how to bring it to the center immediately instead of doing this workaround. That would be great to know. And then I'll pull this out because a lot of times I don't clean up my files too much when I bring it into Cinema 4D. I mean, I don't clean it up before I export it into Cinema 4D is what I'm trying to say. And then I just select children and then connect delete. And I have my path here. So here's my spline. Probably want to zero that out too. I really big proponent of zeroing all my properties just to make sure that everything is clean and zeroed out just makes it easier to work with. And then in my object, intermediate points on the spline is something that, I don't know, I don't like the standard adaptive. I usually change it to subdivided. I just find that it works a little bit better with the way it interprets the geometry. So then we'll hold down Control. I mean, hold down Alt while having our spline selected. It drops it into Extrude. And from there, you know, you can do all sorts of things. Again, just one thing is I like round. I mean, that's usually I just make it like fairly small a bevel on this just because, just to catch the light a little bit, but not overwhelming. I do think less is more in type, just again, the simplicity of it is what I'm usually after. So yeah, so it just has like a little round light, like a little lighting here, which is really nice detail. And from there, to add, well, I guess we can get more finite like a little bit later, but you know, you create the background, etc. But I think this is a good starting point, and then we can talk about it in the next Monday about applying hair and all sorts of bells and whistles to this. Yeah, so I think this is a good start. But oh, I did want to show quickly, actually, some of the. So this was a package that I worked on for National Geographic for the game show called Brain Games. And again, you can see it's very simple background, really not a lot going on because again, you really want the viewer to focus on the information, the name of the show, and obviously all the secondary information that for the tune in, for the audience to tune in. And that was another one here, which is just a darker background. It's just different little promos and things.
Julia?
Yeah.
Just a quick question. Someone was wondering, are you able to share the PDF that you put together, the Maxon title design?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can do that.
Awesome. What I can do is collect it. I can collect it from you after, and we'll put it up on the Dropbox link, which I will supply out to the chat. And then there was just another question regarding your Pinterest page and all the pretty pictures you collect for inspiration. Is that public, like in terms of your Pinterest link, or do you usually keep private links? Can you can you share it with the audience? That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's private. I guess I can make it public.
Oh, cool. Okay, awesome. Yeah, some people were just asking about that in terms of your Pinterest link and stuff. So if you can, that's awesome. And I'll share those links after, or well, at least put the PDF on the actual Dropbox link we have to share. Cool.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Thank you for tuning in. Do I have to do anything? Like stop sharing screen or?
Awesome.
I think Nick might take over the screen.
I will totally take over the screen in a second. And I was fascinated, Julia, by your explanation of how little time you have once a brief is given to you. You're saying like 48 hours you have to turn something around in average, or
that's for a pitch. So if you're pitching on a project, you have to, that's not including all the animation and everything else. It's just to sell the idea. Yeah, and that's usually a very, very short turnaround for that. I mean, unless you have somebody who's really kind and understands the process, then you might have a week or so. But for things that are like things like these kind of shows, it's going to be a pretty quick turnaround.
So very quick turnaround in terms of pitches. I was curious, in your design process, do you ever lean into like something like a free write or mind mapping, or do you primarily use Pinterest to collect information along those terms, along those lines?
Yeah, I'm just used to Pinterest, so I haven't really done the other, I guess, things. I haven't worked with the other programs, so I'm not sure, but that's just something that I got used to, and that's what I do. And then obviously, like, I have my own folder of photos that I take of different type inspiration as well, and then I just combine the two if I have to. And then also, like, obviously you have references for textures and everything else that you add on to this. So I do have, in my Pinterest, I have like more boards for textures and everything else. So, but yeah.
Very cool. No, your Pinterest board is I just love seeing that type of inspiration. And also just when you were talking about neon signs and just drawing inspiration from that, it reminded me of, I'll share with you guys a link later, but there's a neon light studio just inside of Toronto that you could rent out for a photography or video shoot. And I remember just collecting a series of like photographs of neon signs and how they were built. It's almost like a museum where you have like 100 different neon signs. I'll share with you the link later, Julia. But
yeah,
in terms of and in terms of the free write, I should just clarify, this is just a concept I heard of in Austin Shaw's book, where I guess comes to titled sequence design, some designers actually sit down and just sort of write for 10 to 12 minutes on a piece of paper, like whatever's on their mind. No rhyme or reason, but they just write whatever's on their mind. And from that, they try to draw keywords for clarification that relate to the actual pitch on hand. They'll then take these keywords, map out contrasting keywords, and then frame a mind map from those keywords to like literally draw their storyboard title sequences, and then start to look and go through the Pinterest workflow. So I'll share that this is actually in that. Yeah, it's such a cool. It was just a cool concept I heard of in the Design for Motion book.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I feel like I don't know, like how much time would that take?
I guess because it's so interesting because like sometimes you have like the 48 hours to turn around a pitch. And I guess when you're in maybe a team of like 20 or 30 where you have a larger amount of time to dedicate to, let's say, a title sequence like 7 maybe, or a larger, that you might have a little bit more time to do that. I'm so curious about how much time that would take as well. It's something I've tried, not so much in motion graphics or video, but on some other creative projects that I worked on. It's an interesting process, but it does take me, or I sit with it, or am able to sit with it for a week, which might not be applicable when it comes to fast turnarounds or pitches like that.
Yeah, no, I'd love to try that on something else, like something that gives you a little more time to breathe and create something that's more thought out than just that seems to work.
Simon was just mentioning in terms of there's an app I know that's available on the Mac. It's called Mind Node, and you can use it for like mind mapping creative ideas. You can check it out on the App Store. and I've used it a couple times too. So thanks so much for that resource, Simon. And then Julia, just in case anyone wants to reach out to you, oh, there we go. There's the website already up there and running. That's awesome.
Yes, you can go to juliasiemón.com, and also have, well, yeah, I don't really have a professional Instagram yet, so, but I think this is the best way.
Cool. I can't believe how quickly like an hour goes by. It's already like 1:08 in terms of our webinar. So thank you everyone so much for sticking around. And I will steal the screen from you just to bring up a few slides here in a second. Okay. So basically, wanted to show, we had talked a little bit about CV ArtSmart, and I just wanted to bring up the Cineversity page where you can download all of the tools, including ArtSmart. It's a CV toolbox. And I believe this is included with your Cinema 4D subscriptions. And you can access that and all of the tools that come with it, including these Illustrator workflows. So you should totally check that out. This is the Neon Demon Studio that I was talking about in Toronto. You can sort of see some of the neon fixtures. I'll put that in the chat as well. And don't forget to check out the Maxon events page, as well as the Maxon training channel on YouTube, where you can see this recorded webinar. And just before we go, I just wanted to thank everyone here that's smarter than me, which includes Chad, Elly, and Julia. So thank you guys so much for your wisdom and like talent and showing us and taking us through title design.
No, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was
Looking
really
forward to next
cool.
week.
Awesome. And
I learned a lot.
Awesome, guys. And what's on the topic for next week? What are we doing?
I was thinking like a little bit of like sculpting some text and like displacing it, and then like getting into Redshift materials, which is something I absolutely love to do. So lots of fun stuff.
Cool. So without further ado, we'll see you guys next week, and that will same time on Monday, 9 Pacific, 12 Eastern. But thanks everyone so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys soon.
Amazing.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.